Hey guys, so today I am sharing my thoughts on the beautiful Natasha Denona Retro Palette. As soon as I saw the photos of this palette, I knew that I wanted to purchase it. I have been trying to be a lot more selective about which palettes I purchase these days. I have a very large eyeshadow palette collection, and I love eyeshadow palettes, I do, but I feel like these days pretty much everything has already been done. So it takes a really gorgeous color story or interesting formula or finish to really capture my attention, and I just thought that this one was so gorgeous as soon as I saw it. It's something that I didn't know that I wanted from Natasha Denona, but she created it and it is like the palette of my dreams. So I was so excited to grab it. I wanted to share my thoughts on it in today's video. So I did do 2 different looks and I'll also share a review. If you guys want to jump ahead and just see the looks, I'll put timestamps in the description box. I'm a big fan of Natasha Denona's palettes. I don't purchase all of her palettes, but I have a couple of mid-sized palettes and then I also have a couple of minis as well. So I do have the mini retro palette. I actually purchased it just a few months ago because so many people were telling me it is such a staple in their collection. So I finally picked it up and I do love it. I think the color story is really beautiful. The formula is really nice. I actually watched a video from Natasha Denona on Instagram that was really interesting, and she was kind of talking about her inspiration behind this palette, and she really wanted to expand some of the pink shades, the mauve tones, so that's why she created this. But she kind of hinted at a potential greenish, bluish palette coming soon too. I don't know for sure, but if you guys want to check out that video where she explains why she created this one, I'll link it in the description box below. Even though this wasn't the color story I was expecting for a bigger retro palette, I love it. I think it is so stunning. I love pinks. I love berry tones. The last Natasha Denona palette that I purchased was the Zendo palette. I actually ended up decluttering it because I just felt like a lot of the shades were very inconsistent in terms of quality, and I didn't have a lot of luck with it, which surprised me because I've never really had that issue with her mid-sized palettes. I love bronze. I love glam. They are 2 of my absolute favorite palettes, and I have to say I'm really happy with this one. I think it performs so much better than Zendo. So let me give you guys a close-up look at this palette and do some swatches for you. This palette actually has 6 shimmers in it. The shimmers differ in terms of finish. There are some satins, some metallics, a couple of really sparkly topper shadows. Initially when I saw the photos, I didn't realize there were so many cream to powder shadows, and I know a lot of people love that formula, but it hasn't really been my most ideal formula in the past. In fact, I've kind of struggled with it, but I took some tips from you guys. I watched a couple of videos and I kind of switched up my technique with the cream to powder shadows, and I feel like they apply so beautifully. Typically when I'm doing my eyeshadow, even with Natasha Denona shadows, I'll just blend them right into the crease, especially the mattes. I'm not a big pack the shadow on and then lightly blend out the edges type of person. I love to just go in and start blending shadows because I feel like when I do that, I get more of a smooth, even look. But when it comes to her cream to powder formula, the most ideal way to apply it, at least in my experience and based on your tips, is to pack it on and then lightly blend out the edges. You guys will see me use that technique in today's video, and it makes such a difference. And because this formula is so smooth, when you pack it on, it almost blends itself out and you don't really even have to go in and touch up the edges too much. So if you've had trouble with that formula in the past, try that technique. It will make such a difference. And if you like using matte shadows all over the lid, this formula is going to be ideal for that. Typically, I don't love a lot of matte shadows all over the lid. I'll go in with a shimmer, but this formula is one that I would use all over the lid because it looks so smooth. You can just use your finger and blend it out and it looks really good. So if you're someone who deals with a lot of texture or you feel like a lot of eyeshadow doesn't look good on your eyes, I always recommend Natasha Denona's formula because it does look so smooth and even. And now that I've kind of switched up my technique with that cream to powder formula, it looks a lot better and performs really well. And then of course her regular matte shadows are super blendable, really easy to work with, which is really important when it comes to these berry tone shadows because sometimes shades like this can be really patchy and uneven. I will be honest with you guys, I really don't have any complaints about this palette. I think the shadows perform so nicely. I guess my only complaint when it comes to this palette, if I had to be really picky, is that the topper shadow is very sheer. Now it's meant to be a topper and it's meant to be lighter and just kind of transform whatever's underneath it, but I wish it had maybe just a little bit of pigment to it because I felt like I had to layer it up to get the sheen that I wanted, and if it had a little bit of pigment, I think it would have been a little more intense. That's totally personal preference because it's meant to be a topper shadow. If you go in and spray your brush, I think you're going to get a little bit more of a foiled metallic finish. I just don't like to do that. I mentioned in the video that I feel like it tends to ruin the shadows in my palettes. I just like to use my brushes and my fingers. I don't typically go in and spray shadows. So I didn't do that for my look because that's not a technique I use, but you could definitely do that if you want a more vibrant application. I'm so excited to use this alongside the Glam palette. I mentioned that in my purchase or pass video, and then when I was watching her video where she was talking about the inspiration behind this palette, she mentioned that too. And I think these palettes will pair so nicely together, especially heading into the fall and the winter. I tend to reach for more cool tone shadows anyway, so I can't wait to use them together. I'll do that in an upcoming video soon. I've said over and over my favorite Natasha Denona palette is the bronze palette, but I could see this one maybe either like tying for first place or even taking its spot. The bronze palette is so gorgeous and the metallics in there really are so stunning, but I think the mattes and the cream to powder shadows in here are just so easy to work with. So I really do like it. I think it's such a great option. It's a little bit more expensive, but I have to say in terms of quality, it probably is one of her best. Before I get into the two looks, I just wanted to compare it to two palettes in my collection. A lot of you guys said that it reminded you of the Melt Cosmetics She's in Parties palette, so I'll do a close-up shot of them next to each other. They do look very similar. They have shades that come close. Obviously, the Natasha Denona palette has more variety, and the Melt Cosmetics palette is a little bit more curated. I love the Melt Cosmetics palette. I would say if you're going for pigmentation, go with the Melt palette. Those shadows are super rich, very pigmented. You don't have to use a lot of product to get a really intense look. But if you're looking for blendability and more shimmers, go with the Natasha Denona palette. You obviously get more variety with Natasha Denona's palette because it is larger, but I think in terms of quality, the Retro palette really is just easier to work with. Sometimes Melt's formula can be a little bit difficult because the shadows are so pigmented, but if that's what you're looking for, that one will be more ideal for you. Out of the two, I definitely prefer Retro, at least so far. Some of you guys asked me to compare it to Urban Decay's Naked Cherry. Urban Decay's Naked Cherry is nice. It's very blendable, really easy to work with, but I think that one leans a little bit more red toned and it's slightly warmer. Again, out of the two, I definitely prefer the Retro palette. I think the shades in the Retro palette are colors that I would typically reach for more than Naked Cherry, but Naked Cherry's nice. It's really easy to work with, very blendable. I would consider it more of like an easy everyday palette. Other than that, I don't think I have any other palettes in my collection that look super similar. I definitely have colors like this in my collection, but nothing in like a full palette. So I love it. I think it's gorgeous. It will definitely add to my collection. It has to be one of her best formulas that I've tried so far, which makes me happy because I was just excited about it. So if you guys are thinking about it, I think you'll love it. I think the formula really is nice. But again, Black Friday is right around the corner. The Sephora VIB sale is right around the corner. So maybe wait because you can get it for a discounted price, hopefully during at least the Sephora VIB sale. Let me jump into the two looks that I created. The first one is the one that I'm wearing today, and then the second one will be a little bit of a softer look. So for this look, I want to go pretty dramatic and use some of the deeper shades as well as some of the really beautiful sparkly topper shadows. I'm going to start with a little bit of the shade Nude Mauve and just blend that in as a transition color. I think that for the majority of the looks that I'll end up doing with this palette, I'll probably go in with this one as a transition. It's just such a beautifully blendable shadow, so I think it's perfect to kick off any look. I'll make sure to list all of the brushes that I use in the description box below. A lot of them don't have names because I've gotten them in subscription boxes or they're a little bit older, but I'll definitely do my best for you guys if you're curious. And I'm going to do everything on the right eye and then I'll do the left eye off camera just to save some time. So that shadow, you saw it in real time. I didn't cut out any of the blending. It just takes 2 seconds to blend out. Next, I'm going to take the shade Andy, which is one of the cream to powder shadows. And I'm just going to place this in the crease and then a little bit up as a transition, but not too much. I just want a little bit of that pretty soft lavender showing. I really love this color. I think this would be really pretty on its own too, just kind of blended all over the lid. Or even if you stopped right here and just placed like one of these sparkly shimmer shadows all over the lid, that would be a really pretty soft look too. Next, I'm going to take the shade Groove and I'm going to work this into the outer corner. This is a deeper berry toned matte shadow. It's very creamy though. It's not one of the cream to powder shadows. It's definitely like a true powder shadow. I do want this outer corner to be pretty intense, so I'm not going to worry about blending it as much because I am going to go over the majority of the lid with a shimmer shadow. I just really want that intensity in the outer corner. But I am just going to lightly blend it up into the crease just to bring the depth up there as well. Let me do the same thing on the other eye and then I'll come back because I think I'm going to add one more shade on top. On this same brush, I'm going to take a little bit of the shade Rebellion, which is a cream to powder shadow. And I'm just going to use this to darken up the crease a little bit more, but also to blend out the harsh edges. I had a little bit too much on my brush there, so I'm just going in with a clean brush to blend it out. But originally I wasn't the biggest fan of this formula, but I almost feel like maybe it blends a little bit better than the regular matte shadows. The shadow is super, super pigmented, so maybe just go in with a really small amount because I think I applied a little bit too much. So I'm just using a clean brush to kind of blend out the edges even more. I don't want to pull this super deep shade up too high because I do want the majority of the dark shadow to be under the crease, so I'm just lightly blending it out. A lot of the time with really dramatic, like deeper berry tones, you're going to get a ton of fallout. That's just not the case with this palette. I really think it's just going to become such a staple in my collection. Now I'm going to go in with the shade Swing, which is a really beautiful, deeper, well, like mid-toned purple, and I'm just going to blend this all over the lid. This one has more of a satin finish, especially compared to some of the really intense metallics in the palette, but I think it's great, well, either on its own, but I was going to say as a base shadow before you go in with one of those sparkly toppers. So for the lid, I'm going to take the shade Psychedelic, and I'm just going to take this on my finger, and this is the first time I'm using it, so I really hope it transforms the look. I'm just going to really focus it on the center. Okay, I'm not going to lie, it's a little bit more subtle than I thought it was going to be, so I'm just going to kind of pack it on and see what we can get. I'm going to take it into the inner corner as well and just focus it on the first, well, kind of 2/3 of the lid. It is pretty. I'm getting a little bit of fallout. You could totally apply this with like a brush and spray your brush to get a really intense finish. I just don't like to do that. I find that it kind of ruins the texture of my shadows when I dip back in with a wet brush. And I've just never really done that when I've done my eyeshadow, so I don't want to do that today, just because I feel like that's not a way that I would personally use the palette, but I'm sure if you wet a brush, you could get a really intense look, but it does look intense once you build it up. I think spraying the brush would probably take care of the fallout. You wouldn't experience that. I'm going to have to go in and kind of clean that up in just a second, but let me do the other eye. I'm actually going to take a little bit of the shade Glitz as well, and just pack that right in the center of the lid. I'm just curious to know what that one looks like. So the shade Psychedelic looks pretty pink in the pan, but because it is a topper shadow, whatever you layer underneath is going to influence the way that it looks. This one kind of has more of like a silvery, cool-toned pink finish. They're both really pretty, definitely topper shadows. I wouldn't say that either one of them has a lot of pigment to them, but I think that's fine because you do get a lot of really pretty colors to work with in this palette. So I mean, it's kind of nice because you could use them as just like a light shimmery wash of color if you don't want anything too intense, or you can layer them on top. I'm just going back in with that brush to darken up the outer corner. I don't have any extra product on there. I'm just using what I already had. I'm just going to go back in with a little bit of nude mauve and just work that up as a transition again. And then I'm actually going to apply the highlight shade before I apply eyeliner. So I'm just going to take a little bit of the shade Maud and blend that right under the brow bone. Before I go in and clean things up, I'm just going to do the lower lash line. So I think I want to go pretty dramatic on the lower lash line. I think I'll start with the shade Groove. This is a deeper toned matte shadow. I'm just going to blend this out and really work that into the lower lash line. You know what technique I really want to try? Not today, but I really do want to try like the reverse cat eye technique. I think that looks so pretty. I've seen a lot of people do looks like that just on TikTok, on YouTube, and I'm definitely curious to try it out. So one of these days, I'm going to give it a shot. Okay, let me clean things up, apply some liner and lashes, and I'll be right back. So this is the final look. To finish off the look, I just applied the Urban Decay Perversion liquid liner and did a wing, and then the lashes I'm wearing are the House of Lashes Iconic Light Lashes. Then on my waterline, I have the Too Faced Killer Liner in the shade Killer Chocolate, which is kind of like a berry-toned brown. It's a nice alternative to black if you do want a more dramatic color, and these stay in place so well. And then on my lips, I have the Christian Audette lipstick in the shade Beauty, which is kind of like a light pinky nude. And then I'm wearing the Tower 28 lip oil in the shade Fearless. So I hope you guys enjoyed this first look, which is a little bit more dramatic. Let me jump into the second look, which is a little bit softer. So for this look, I want to use some of the rosier tones in here and not take it quite as dramatic, but create more of a mid-toned, kind of rosy, bronzed look. So I'm going to start with the shade Nude Mauve and just blend this into the crease as a transition color. Overall, it's a great lighter shade that works well to blend out harsh edges or as a transition. I'm just going to take a little bit more right in this area. I always have a hard time blending eyeshadow right here. It's just perpetually a dry area on my eye. And no matter what shadow I'm using, it typically doesn't look super blended, so I just have to work extra hard to blend it out right in that spot. Actually, this shadow is kind of sitting really nicely on that area, which doesn't typically happen for me. So anyway, let me do the same thing on the other eye and I'll be right back. So next I'm going to take the shade Go Go and I'm just going to start stamping this into the crease. This is one of the cream to powder shadows. Typically I find that they apply best if you kind of stamp them on and then lightly blend out the edges. I don't have a lot of luck using these with a blending brush. The nice part about this formula is that it just looks so smooth on the eyes. Like even more smooth than her regular matte formula. You just have to figure out how to work with it. But I think they just require a little bit of a different technique. So now that it's packed on there, I'm just going to very, very lightly blend out the edges and that's it. Okay, I'm going to take the same brush and the shade Amara and just really focus this on the outer corner. This one is a true lightweight powder matte shadow, so it does build well. So I'm just going to focus a little bit and then lightly blend it into the crease little by little. This blends out really easily too. I don't want to go too dramatic with this look because my other look is definitely on the more dramatic side. So I'm not going to build it up too much. I just want everything to look really blended. Next, I'm just going to take the shade Helio, which is a beautiful kind of like taupey rosy shimmer. I think overall when you use this, you are going to get a little bit more of a colorful look. But I also think this color would pair really well with the Glam palette because it would add like a hint of pink without being too over the top. And the Glam palette is very, very neutral. I'm just going to apply the Urban Decay Perversion liquid liner on my upper lash line and wing it out. I'm going to keep it a little bit softer on the lower lash line. I'm actually just going to go in with the color that I used as a transition color. I think a smoky lower lash line would be really pretty too, but I kind of want to keep it a little bit more bright and open. So on the waterline, I just applied the LA Girl Shockwave metallic liner in the shade Lullaby, which is kind of like a very light, almost pearly nude with a little bit of a metallic sheen. I think it just opens up the eyes really well. And then I finished the look with the Essence Lash Princess Curl and Volume Mascara. I applied quite a bit on the upper lashes and then just a light layer on the lower lashes. To finish the look, I'm just going to take a little bit of the lightest matte shadow in here called Mod and just highlight the brow bone. I feel like I applied just a little bit too much, so I'm just going back in with the brush that I used for my crease. I don't have any extra product on there, I just blended it out. I'm also going to take that in the inner corner, just kind of use that to lightly clean up the edges. Typically I like a nice shimmery inner corner highlight, but I think I'm just going to leave the matte shadow. I'm just going to apply it with a little bit more of a targeted brush right in the very inner corner. Okay, that is the final look. I hope you guys enjoyed it. On the lips, I just have the Bite Beauty matte lip crayon in the shade Leche, and then a little bit of the Makeup by Mario lip gloss in the shade Mauve Nude, and I feel like it ties in really well with the eyes. So I hope you guys enjoyed this second softer look. All of the shadows blended really well together. I didn't have any issues with any of the shades, which was great. Okay, guys, that is the end of my video. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys have any other questions regarding like comparisons or anything like that, let me know, and I can share them on my Instagram stories, my YouTube stories. If you guys purchased this, I would love to hear your thoughts. Let me know your experience in the comment section below. But otherwise, I'll see you guys very soon with a new video. Bye.